Okay. Okay, so what I thought I would do is take you a little bit behind the scenes in the Unicode Consortium. One of my favorite web comics put it this way, and this is what we're trying to do. And sometimes it's a little bit tricky to go this way, but we've managed through now since about 1987. So that's quite a ways. And I think the first thing you really wanted to see when you came to this conference was org charts. But org charts serve a purpose. They tell you how things are connected, and I'm going to take you through what these things mean, how things fit together, because for a lot of people, Unicode is just a big black box. So at the top, we have the full members, and these, you can see the logos at the bottom. We have several members of several levels of membership, but the full members are the ones who actually determine who the board of directors are. Okay, then we hit the board of directors. These are individuals representing themselves, but typically they're coming from member corporations. There's some people who are not. Then we have Terrell. Where's Terrell? Okay. And Terrell covers the CTO and TCG. And this group is a group of people which represent the chairs for all of the technical committees, plus a few advisors, and you can see their pictures here. And then we have the ops team. And the ops team are putting together things and making sure everything works. And there are a lot of people behind these pictures. So these are just some of the people that are involved. I didn't go through and put all the pictures in that I had for all of the people because that gets a little hard to do. But now I'll take you through at a top level what the technical committees are. The first one is the UTC. And that's responsible for text and characters. And very importantly, it's involved in the definition of behavior of text and characters. And this depends upon various properties of the characters, I think well over 100 currently, plus how they work together. So when you see things line break on the screen, that's because of this committee's work. This committee determines not only what all the characters are, and it provides the properties of the character, how it line breaks, how it cases, how it functions in lots of different ways, and the algorithm that determines how line breaking works. So just as a lot of things, the behavior of characters is absolutely vital, not only here, but in other aspects such as politics. We then hit the CLDR and a lot of these acronyms are historical and don't mean much to people. So CLDR is a bit of a mouthful. It stands for Common Locale Data Repository. But it's much more than that. And it governs the structure and data and behavior of things like dates and times and numbers and units of measurement and so forth. And we collect for over 100 languages, and for about 90 of those languages, a very complete set of data that allows programs to work with all of these things. So when you look at a date on your iPhone or your Android or on your Mac or your Windows box, then you're seeing the results of not only the UTC for the characters and the behavior, but also the language specific details that comes from this data and the structure that holds it. Then what puts this all together is the ICU-TC. ICU, the acronym has gone through a couple of iterations, changing the names that underlie the acronym, but functionally it works to supply APIs and code. And the ICUTC supplies Java and C++ and C APIs. And then the ICU4X, which is a relatively new initiative, which we're very interested in. And Shane will talk more about that. When's your talk, Shane? Tomorrow. So I'd encourage people to go to that. That's our newest effort in this area, and that's doing Rust. So how do these committees function? Well, each of these committees has a set of work groups, and the work groups focus on different areas that are needed to put everything together. If we take the UTC, then we've got the script and coding group, and who's from the script and coding group here? Yeah. Debbie, Peter. And this is the group that takes in all the proposals for different scripts around the world. So each version of Unicode comes in with new scripts. It also comes in with new characters, sometimes new currency symbols, sometimes archaic characters. We have a whole set of cuneiform, for example, and newly we have an addition to hieroglyphs. So this is the committee that works with all of that. Very closely related, but two down, is the CJK and Unihan Working Group, and they work on all of the ideographs and characters from the Far East. And this, by volume, is the largest set of Unicode characters, are the ideographs. The Properties and Algorithms Group, headed by Marcus here. Raise your hand if you're in the Properties and Algorithms Group. Oh, Chris, you can put your hand up. Yes. Alongo. Okay, great. Yes, there are many more people who are not here. This is the group that defines the algorithms, that takes care of all of the requests for property changes, algorithm changes, and so forth, and assigns the properties for these new characters based upon the proposals that come into the script and coding group. And then we have the emoji group. And Jennifer, I don't think, is Jennifer here? She'll be here tomorrow. She'll be here tomorrow. So I encourage you to talk to Jennifer. She's been running this for a few years now, and they are the group that processes all of the very many requests that people get, that the UTC gets for emoji characters, and assesses them and ranks them and determines which emoji come out each year. And so I encourage you to go to her talk if you're interested in emoji. There's a new group, which is the text terminal group, looking at characters on terminals. And then we have a number of infrastructure groups that are important for actually producing the Unicode standard and related standards. The charts editorial group, and the editorial group is showing up twice. I think I gummed that up. So I should have done that, yeah. And Copy Edit could use that too. So there are a number of talks related to this. I didn't put them all down here, but there are a number of talks during these 2 days where you can learn more about what's happening in these different groups. So CLDR-TC, I'm the chair. Anne-Marie is there is the vice chair, and then we have other people. Who all's from the CLDR committee? Frederick, raise your hand. Conrad, Marcus, okay. George is sort of halfway, yes. Okay. And this committee is dealing with language issues. These are things, as I talked about, dates, times, numbers, how languages collate. The Unicode standard provides a default, and the Unicode collation standard defines a default encoding collation order for every character in Unicode, so all 150,000 of them. But languages differ. So Swedish sorts an A umlaut different than German does, or an O umlaut different than German does. So these things, all of these different fine gradations made upon language, happen in this committee. There's a design group, which is actually common to CLDR and the ICU groups, which helps to make sure that the designs for data in CLDR work with the code that's going to use that data in ICU and in ICU for X. Then we have the person name group, where was up, that's headed by Mike. And that is looking at how people's names need to be formatted, because names are surprisingly complicated. And if you will learn about that, you can go to Mike's talk. And Rich is also there. And this is a very tricky subject, and the group is now looking at validation, which is really interesting because you want to make sure that people are not putting in nonsense, but there's a lot of validation that goes over and above what people's names really need. And so they're too strict. So there are a lot of people, especially people with different scripts, that find that their names just can't be entered into a particular form. So the goal is to present some data and mechanisms so that we can get pretty good validation without going overboard and restricting people's actual names. The keyboards working group is a relatively new effort, and that's looking at providing keyboards for languages that aren't as interesting for the big players, so that there's a definition if a platform or project wants to support a keyboard that's not among the top 150 or so languages, then there's a place for them to go to get the keyboard layout for those languages. Message format, Addison, Emily are going to be talking about that. Was it that tomorrow, I think? Yeah. So I'd encourage you to go to that talk. I won't say much about it because there is so much to say that you should go to that talk. And we have the DDL group, and DDL is a term for digitally disadvantaged languages. Those are languages kind of out of the top 100 that don't get a lot of attention by major platforms. And the goal is to push out the number of languages that can be supported in CLDR, which then can get picked up by ICU and then appear on people's machines. And finally, we have an infrastructure group that supports all of this effort, and there's a lot of tooling involved. Conrad, where's Conrad? Yeah, Conrad is going to take you through a demo of how the tooling works and how the tool gathers information for different languages later on. So there are lots of talks about that. The Unicode code libraries, without them, nothing would work. They form the basis when you look at any machine nowadays for how this comes to life and how programs can use this, because the algorithms are fairly complicated and you don't want to have everyone try to reinvent the wheel each time. So we have a very standard set of code that's been tested, very widely deployed, that makes all of this work. So it makes all of the work in encoding characters, defining the behavior, defining how they work, getting the dates, numbers, times, ordering, and so on working. All of this is coming out through the efforts of these groups. And these are not as subdivided as some of the other groups, but you'll find out a lot more about these as you go deeper. And then we have the operational teams. And these are the teams that support the group, that support the efforts of all of these groups. Without them, we wouldn't have the servers. We wouldn't have the function to make sure that everything's working on the website, that you can access all this material and so forth, that put on events like this and so on. Terrell could take you through more of the details here. And questions. So I have time for a couple of questions now, because I've talked much more quickly than I thought I was going to talk. But also I have a talk tomorrow, which is why does Unicode do that? And I'm trying to cover some of the questions that people have about why Unicode does strange things, either in the Unicode standard, other Unicode standards in CLDR or ICU. So send any questions that you have to my email address and I'll pick among them. And if you pose an interesting question, then I'll try to cover it. Sure.
How can one becomes a member of the working group? Can you repeat the question?
The question is, how do you become a member of a working group? Basically, if you're all of the way it works is that anyone from Unicode member has the right to be in the TC. So if you're a delegate from one of the full Unicode members, then you can join the TC and you can engage in that. You can become a member in regular attendance. And the work groups are formed by the TCs. So the TC will say, okay, well, we need to really do a deep dive into keyboards. There's a specialized group of people and we can pull in experts from outside. So if you are interested in becoming part of a work group, then you can contact people in the TC or the work group and say, well, I have expertise in this area and I'm interested in joining. Other questions? I'll focus on sort of organizational structure and stuff now. Chris, you look like you have a question.
I was thinking on behalf of our students in the back, how can students get involved in Unicode?
Well, that's a good question. There is a student membership. People can join Unicode as student membership with a student membership. If you have particular interest, then you can contact people in the various committees. We also have some interns and some smiling faces I see right there. I worked with a couple of interns sponsored by Stanford recently. And so we have interns who could get involved and in various areas, and it depends upon your expertise. Now, some people can code and they can help out with the various sorts of coding projects that we have. The two interns that I worked with did that. Other interns can help with all sorts of things. There's program management, there's editing, there's a lot of you look at a lot of the documentation we have, and there are lots of ways that we could make that clearer. So there are lots of areas. We do want to reach out to DDL languages and try to get contacts among the DDL languages to move those languages forward. I'll just say a little bit about that. The way CLDR works is that any of the TC members are part of an organization. So CLDR recognizes I guess I can't get too far from this. It won't pick up my text here. So CLDR works in terms of organizations. So Google, Apple, Microsoft, Meta, all have organizations in CLDR, and they have people that contribute data in through what's called the survey tool. As I say, you can see Conrad's talk later about that. But we also allow other organizations, and so we will take things like the Welsh Language Board. We'll form an organization. We will make sure that they look like a reasonable organization, and then they can act autonomously and sign up people to help with Welsh language. And this for languages, we had also a Finnish ministry, for example, that has an organization that they basically assigned in an organization the ability to speak for Finland, and they were very active in engaging and producing results for Finnish, and they can sign up a number of different people to work with the survey tool to contribute in Finnish. So we can take additional languages in, actually anyone. So Chira's mother could sign up for an account for Serbian and she could contribute Serbian, but she only gets a very, very small vote. However, if there's a Serbian university or ministry or something that wants to sign up and produce a Serbian organization, then they get a full vote in working with the Serbian language. Other questions? Yeah, in the back.
No worries. Does it work? Yes. I'm curious about how a company becomes a member and what are the politics around that?
Yeah, there are very few politics about that. I guess that was recorded. Is that right? Alonga, do I need to repeat it? Okay, yeah. There are very few politics around that. The main requirement is that they have to agree to support the Unicode's mission going forward. So as I say, if you look at the website, you'll see there are several different levels of membership that people or organizations can join at. So you get full members like Microsoft joins as a full member. It's actually actively involved in picking the board, and it can have members in any of the TCs. Then we have levels of engagement below that, but many people are engaged in the associate membership and so forth. They're just not part of the full members, so they don't pick the board. That's pretty much the main difference among them. Oh, absolutely. Why don't you come up here so you can come up?
So that's a great question. So we do rely on members for supporting the organization as a nonprofit open source open standard. And as Mark was saying, there are 3 tiers. There's a full membership, there's a supporting membership, which is where Stanford is, as an example, and there's an associate membership. So at the full membership, the organizations get governance votes for the organization itself as well as technical governance. And then for supporting, they get technical governance votes and votes for the priorities. And at the full and supporting level, the organizations have to be approved by the board. So that's just an important note because they have governance votes and we want to make sure that Unicode works for everybody. So it's not really political, but it is kind of strategic and thoughtful.
You should stay here. You can answer. Does that satisfy you? Yeah. Okay. Rich.
Can you say something about individual memberships?
Yes, we do have individual memberships and quite a number of individual memberships. And we also have a lot of 10-year people who get basically, once you hit your 10-year mark, then you go on forever.
Yeah, so individual memberships, building off of what Mark just said, they are critical for us. We have student level, we have just individual, and we have lifetime memberships as well. So for lifetime, it's a set fee, you pay and you're a member for life. Sounds kind of obvious.
Yeah. Should be interesting if it weren't obvious.
Right.
Okay.
Should call it something else.
Yes.
Peter.
Peter.
You mentioned the grant committee.
Right.
Can you say a little more about what's that about?
Sure. Actually, I'll let Charles.
Yeah.
answer that.
So Peter's question was, you said something about a grants committee. Could you talk a little bit more about that? So the second primary way that Unicode is supported is through donations, primarily through our Adopt a Character program. And we secure those funds to support work on digitally disadvantaged languages. So people can apply for grants or reach out and say, you know, I'm interested in pursuing a Cherokee keyboard, for example, or whatever. And so we do fund that type of work as well through the Adopt a Character program and other donations. And I would ask, as you're asking questions, if you wouldn't mind just also stating your name for everyone and your organization, if you want to indicate your organization, please, too. That doesn't mean stop asking questions.
Stops.
I know, right? Like, that's just like, oh my gosh.
I don't want to tell my name. Okay.
Yes, please.
My name's Sammy. I'm a student from, am I supposed to stand? I'll sit.
You can set the bar. You can do whatever you want.
You know what? I'll take a stand.
Great.
My name's Sammy. I'm a student from Harvard University. I was wondering what's kind of the background of like the fund. So obviously you all are raising money for these sorts of things. What's kind of like, what are they funding? Is it mostly staff, these events, things like that?
Yeah, well, I can answer that. Or you
Yeah,
can.
why don't you start?
Oh, okay, sure. Well, our funding comes primarily from our membership plus donations. And so that goes to a number of different things. It goes to, paying for the servers, paying for support staff, helping out. It's a very, very lean organization. So we have how many
Fewer than
employees now?
the equivalent of 3 full-time employees.
Yes. So most people are volunteers or they're working for companies who volunteer their time in order to do work on Unicode. So most of the money goes to fund kind of the operations of Unicode. Plus, we do take in these donations for DDL languages primarily, and for scripts, so people can get apply for funding to write a proposal for a script, for example, or for additional characters. And Peter can say a lot more about that. But that's primarily where it goes. So it's a fairly lean organization. It's also fairly small in terms of revenue.
Yeah, it kind of blows my mind about how small we are and on tens of billions of devices that everybody relies on. And so Mark's exactly right. The staff and then the technology infrastructure to support the technical work and the mission.
We have time for like one last question.
One last question. Yeah. Anybody have questions about org charts? Now's the time. You never have to think about org charts again for the rest of the 2 days. Yeah,
Can
cheer.
you go back to the initial deck? It seems that Toral is above you on the chart, and she said you're her boss. So how does that?
Okay, how does that work? Yes. Through the magic, I'm the chairman of the board. So I'm her boss. Okay. And if you wait for just a second, Kathy is the vice chair of the board, and she will be here this evening, I guess,
this afternoon, I
and
think.
tomorrow. Yeah. So we also have a ask us anything tomorrow. I think it's the last session.
So stick around for that.
So, and Kathy will be there for that. She's the vice chair. Then we've got Terrell. Then we've got the CTO and the TCG. So I am both under and over her. It's kind of like Schrodinger's cat. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of the, it's because Mark wears so many hats. So that's why that works out that way.
Actually, because I'm on the, I chair the CLDR committee, I'm also my own boss.
So Sammy, this goes to operating very leanly. This is what happens. You
Yeah,
know?
you'll find a lot of people have a lot of multiple hats. Yeah. So, one last question, if it's quick.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Yaniv from Square. A question about how do you distribute the results of what Unicode does, and how is there awareness in the industry of what is offered since it's so crucial to all of the digital tools?
Okay. Well, I'll start with a little story. My daughter went to UCD, and in her first programming course, they said on the first day, they said, well, this is about Unicode. And she was really jazzed. And so she gave me a phone call right away and said, they mentioned it the very first day. So if you're programmers, then you're very familiar with Unicode because it's the way that text works. You're not probably familiar with all of the different aspects of Unicode because it gets very complicated once you get under the covers. It's like when people say, well, English has very simple grammar until you get down into phrasal verbs and then your mind explodes. So there's a lot of awareness among programmers. outside of programmers, probably we're known as the people who make emoji that appear on your phones. One of the things that we need to do is drive more awareness of what Unicode is, what it does, why it's important, and why people and companies need to get involved.
So I have a question for the group. For those of you who are already familiar with Unicode or already involved, when Mark went through this overview of the different working groups and the technical committees, how many of you learned something new?
Addison, nothing was a surprise.
So how many was that?
I would say it was about a quarter that raised their hands. And that is, Mark mentioned the black box. That is the black box. That is Unicode. So even within this room of people who are Unicode enthusiasts or ambassadors already, I see a couple of them raising hands that they didn't even know, like the level of work that's taking place. And so your question is an excellent one, and it's also the opportunity that we've been trying to leverage, because we do need to get that word out and not be taken for granted. So any ideas on that are always welcome.
Okay, thank you very much.